The CIA is a good example. That was intended to be exactly what it says, the Central Intelligence Agency. It was going to be a small agency that was going to take the intelligence from the Army and the Air Force and the Navy and everybody else and coordinate it. And it was intended to stop duplication of effort. And instead it created a whole monster that we're still having to deal with, okay? And it'll never go away. Homeland Security will never go away. We should never have passed it in the first place, but there was no debate, no talk. They got Homeland Security the night it started off, it was a 30-page thesis saying here's what we probably need to do, and by the time it got to Congress it was 500 pages, and they got it the night before the vote. Now folks, I don't care how smart you are, you can't read 500 pages, absorb it, think about it, and make an intelligent decision. And I'll tell you, for that one fact alone, and I'm not even going to argue the merits of Homeland Security, but for the mere fact that your representatives passed a law that they hadn't even read, I think should be cause enough for a recall. You ought to throw every one of them out. Because what's the first thing a lawyer will tell you? Never sign anything until you've read it. And these guys passed the Patriot Act and the Homeland Security, and they didn't even read it. They had no idea what they were passing. Does any of y'all remember back about 1997 or 1998, there was a little furor that got going over something called a banking program called Know Your Customer. Anybody remember that? Yeah, and the whole idea is that your bank was going to have to turn around and be a snitch to the federal government. If your deposits somehow were a little bit different than the normal, or if you withdrew an inordinate amount of money or whatever, they were going to report you, be required to report you, and they were going to keep massive personal information files, okay? Your wife, your family, et cetera, et cetera. But that kind of got public, and everybody went, wait a minute, we're not going to put up with that. And sure enough, they kind of backed off, and we all felt real good, right, that they didn't get that through. It's in Homeland Security. It's in there. It's happening. And you never got to vote on it, did you? You can go all the way back to the war between the states, or where I come from, we call it the War of Northern Aggression. But it was a deal. It was all a deal. Auguste Belmont, a registered agent of the Rothschild banking family in Europe, came to this country and quickly became the leading seller of bonds for the federal government. He's the one that got the money to prosecute the war between the states. At the same time, he was quietly buying up all the southern bonds. It was a deal. Even Chancellor Bismarck of Germany is on the record as saying that the war in the 1860s in the United States was contrived by the Rothschilds to split the country in half so that they could regain North America for the bankers in France and Britain. And if you'll stop and think about it, where was the bulk of the British Army? It was in Canada. Where was the French Army? Anybody? Mexico, under Maximilian. So they were going to let the North and South bleed each other dry, and then they were going to move in. There's only one man who seemed to understand what was going on, and that was the head Yankee, Abraham Lincoln. I'll have to give him some grudging credit. I think he understood what was happening. And that's why he became the first American president to print his own money, known as greenbacks. Do you know there's only been one other president in the history of this country that tried to print interest-free money? John F. Kennedy. June 1963, he ordered the issuance of $6 billion in currency, not through the Federal Reserve System, but through the United States Treasury. I have a $5 note. It says Series 1963. It's got red ink on it. It says United States note. It doesn't say Federal Reserve note. And I don't think it's a coincidence that both of those presidents were shot in the head. So now we can see what I call my pyramid of power. That's us down at the bottom. The poor, long-suffering public. Over us is the low-level political structure. There's your local city council, school board and stuff, most of whom are good people trying to do a difficult job. A few snakes in there, but you know, as we learned in the Army, there's always 2% that won't go along with the program. And your mass media. And this thing maybe that disturbs me most about the mass media, having worked in it, it's not that they're bad, it's not that they're liberal, it's not that they're conservative, it's that they're dumb and they're lazy, okay? They don't want to work, so they will not go out and really pursue a story or look past the superficial explanation. They just take the government handout and they run with it. And this really bothers me because, you know, I think about it in our own personal life. If you have a good friend and you find that friend is lying to you, then that upsets you. But that's a friend, so you try to forgive them and you try to rationalize and think, well, maybe they just didn't understand. Then you catch them lying to you again. Well, now it's going, boy, I don't know. Third or fourth time they lie to you, they're no longer your friend, are they? I used to just say, I don't want to have anything to do with that person. He's a liar. Well, the government has got caught lie after lie after lie after lie, and still they come out and say something and the news media just runs with it as if that's the gospel. And then it takes 6 months, 6 years, 40 years for us to find out that it was all a big lie. Then you come on up to your military intelligence agencies and your high-level political structure. Then you come on up to the multinational corporations and the hub of the New World Order, the United Nations, and it's now military arm, NATO. Okay, and then you come on up through the Council on Foreign Relations, and you notice they're not even at the top of the pyramid, because you get up higher and it even gets higher, and then you get up to John Coleman calls the Committee of 300, others call the Illuminati, and then you got a big question mark, because who's telling those people what to do? Now we start into real history. I'm not going to really belabor you about Freemasonry other than to tell you that you might want to be aware that the first third party in the United States was the anti-Masonic party. And they broke the back of Masonic Freemasonry back in the early 1800s, and it never quite recovered until after the Civil War. Within Freemasonry, this isn't my theory, this is what Masonic historians and writers will tell you, if they're honest. There's a huge outer circle. Well, first let me say this. There's a tremendous difference between European Freemasonry and American Freemasonry. The European Freemasonry is much more sinister and has much more ties to politics and to the Illuminati. But the North American Freemasonry is much more of a kind of a fraternal order, and they do great things. Their burn centers are wonderful. But within Freemasonry, in both sides of the ocean, there's an outer circle, and then there's a little inner core circle that knows what's really going on and what their agenda really is. Now, don't bother to ask a Masonic friend if that's true, because he will tell you no. And that's because he's either part of the outer circle, in which case he really truly does not know that there's an inner circle, or he's part of the inner circle, in which case he's taken a blood oath never to reveal that. Okay? But Freemasonry is where a lot of these thoughts, ideals, and knowledge has been passed along, because the men who made up Cecil Rhodes's roundtables, which were the progenitors of the Council on Foreign Relations, Trilateral, etc., were Illuminized Freemasons. They were Freemasons who had been instilled with the knowledge and with the agendas of the Illuminati. And what was that? Where did they think they got all this from? Well, here's Manly Wade Hall, a philosopher, a much studied occultist, and a very high-ranking Mason. And he says, in the remote past, the gods walked with men, and they chose from among the sons of God the wisest and the truest. And these they labored with, preparing them to carry on the work of the gods after the spiritual hierarchies themselves had withdrawn into the invisible worlds. With these specially ordained and illumined sons, they left the keys of their great wisdom. These illumined ones founded what we now know as the ancient mysteries. George Washington, big Masonic. So they're passing along the ancient mysteries through Freemasonry. By the way, if you think that the Illuminati is just something you can laugh at and just some kind of boogaboo. Here's a letter in 1782 from George Washington where he said, "It was not my intention to doubt that the doctrines of the Illuminati had not spread to the United States. On the contrary, no one is more fully satisfied of that fact than I am." These guys knew more about what was going on than we do today with all our modern technology and all our electronic communications.